There is probably no one in the world who has more economic data at his disposal to monitor the economic crisis. That makes him a first-class global reference. Olivier Blanchard, Economic Councillor and Director of the Research Department of the International Monetary Fund in Washington, or less lyrically, the IMF's chief economist. Born in France, he spent his entire professional life in the US working at the country's top research institutions like MIT and Harvard.
Mr. Blanchard, there have been signs recently that the global economic downturn is bottoming out. Is there really a sustained recovery underway? And if yes, what about the timing and the speed of that recovery?
I'll give 3 parts to the answer. The first one, I think we've avoided the worst. I think that's very, very good news. The second is that we had extremely bad numbers for the last quarter of 2008, first quarter of 2009. We're not going to see anything like this anymore. But we're probably going to see still negative growth in the second quarter, maybe the third quarter in advanced countries. Then it will turn positive, close to zero next year, slightly higher. Then the third is we basically need to build on this, and that's the recovery part. At this stage, we don't think it's going to be a very strong recovery. We're thinking about going back maybe to a stable path within 3 to 5 years. It's going to take a long time.
Financial markets remain concerned that huge government spending and central bank cash injections, especially in the US, would spark inflation and undercut any nascent rebound. Do you share these worries?
As far as central banks are concerned, they have increased their balance sheet enormously. But I think it was largely because they bought assets that private investors didn't want to buy. So I think as the recovery comes and private investors are willing to buy these assets, they'll be able to basically sell these assets back to them. So I'm not terribly worried about the inflation part. I think the fiscal part is more worrisome. That's the second part of what you said, the second half. And I think there the governments face a really difficult challenge. What they should not do is stop the fiscal stimulus now, because if they did this, private demand at this stage is still very weak. And so if they stop basically pushing demand, we would probably not see the recovery. So there has to be fiscal stimulus, at least this year, probably next year, maybe even the year after.
One particularly difficult problem in Europe is unemployment.
Right.
Now, usually things on the labor market improve after the overall economy is picking up. How do you see the situation right now? Is there a risk that Europe will suffer sustained high unemployment?
You're absolutely right. Again, 2 parts to the answer, which is that it's true that when growth becomes positive, that's not enough to decrease unemployment. Growth has to be higher than normal. That's going to take a while. That's going to come around the end of 2010 or something like this. So until then, unemployment is going to continue to increase. And then after this, you need growth higher than normal in order to decrease unemployment. So in the best of scenarios, you're going to get unemployment increasing in Europe for some time, probably another year and a half. Then the question is, can you get it back down? And there you have 2 problems. Demand has to be sufficient, but you also have to make sure that the labor market can respond.
High unemployment hurts consumption and growth prospects. That's why many governments around the world have come up with major stimulus plans. What is your assessment of the situation right now? Is there a need to tighten monetary and fiscal policy further, or is it time to do less?
Surely now it is not time to take away the fiscal stimulus or to start increasing interest rates. The economy is very weak. Private demand is very weak. If you think about consumers, they are not in the mood to spend. If you look at firms, they are not in the mood to invest. So if you were to take away the stimulus, you'd basically stop the recovery. So it's absolutely essential for the moment to continue with monetary policy and fiscal policy as we have in the last year.
A risk to recovery are high oil prices, which could increase the danger of stagflation, a combination of high inflation and declining output. How real is this danger now that oil prices are up again?
Well, it complicates a bit the recovery. It's one more break to the recovery. I don't think it will kill the recovery. I think we may have seen an increase in oil prices which is not justified by fundamentals. When you see this, you expect that things will basically adjust. So I don't think that we're going to see oil prices go much above $70. If they stay around that, that seems like a good price and a price which is consistent with a recovery.
Regulation of financial markets.
Right.
Now, the bulls and the bears of the markets won't be tamed totally, and we will certainly see more transparency, more responsibility, and more stability. But there seems to be a rift within the G20 or the G8 over the degree of regulation. What do you think? What can we reasonably expect when all the dust has settled?
We don't quite know what to expect when the dust settles, not only because we're not sure exactly what type of regulation we need, but because we don't know what kind of financial system we're going to get. And in turn, the financial system we get depends a bit on the type of regulation we have. So I think here there are some principles, which is that you cannot regulate just part of a financial system. You actually have to look at the whole financial system. You have to look at systemic risk, which involves looking, if not regulating, a much larger number of players. I think that's a main principle. I'm under no illusion that whatever regulation there is, we will miss something and something else will come, hopefully not of the same magnitude as what we've seen.
Last question. Much has changed for the IMF during the economic crisis. The G20 summit promised a tripling of the fund's lending capacity. The IMF prepares to issue bonds for the very first time. So, on the whole, the fund seems to be getting unprecedented resources. Now, in light of this rearming, how do you assess the future role and the future influence of the IMF?
I think the fund will play an important role if it can monitor systemic risk of not only of a financial nature, which was the case of this crisis, but of different kinds. It basically has to be on the lookout. It is in a unique position to basically see what happens in the world. We get an enormous amount of information that nobody else gets. I think we basically have to play that role, be ready to lend if needed. If we succeed in this, will be important not only in the crisis, which we have been, but in the next 10, 20, 30 years. That's what we're aiming to do.
Olivier Blanchard, Chief Economist of the International Monetary Fund, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Good.